Hey everyone, I am Clint. Welcome to Sweetcast. I write comics and sometimes make videos about the failing comic book industry. Now, there are some opinions you're not supposed to have if you're in comics. It's kind of funny because being optimistic is a good thing, but you can go overboard. And the kind of rosy optimism that they expect in comics can actually be really detrimental because it's almost like a frog boiling in water. You're in denial that something is happening, and then before too late, suddenly you're boiled frog legs. So I want to get into this. Jamal Igle, he had a response here. Okay, so let me get to the root of it. All right, so here's the basis of it. Somebody posted Wonder Woman, DC at Wonder Woman, posted girls writing, and the whole conference or this whole get together was just about getting girls to write comics. And so this is interesting to me because you see this a lot all over, especially in STEM fields, people directly reaching out, trying to get more girls into writing. Now, I will say girls actually do write a lot. If you're just speaking of the profession of writing fiction for that matter, but writing comics is perhaps a little bit different. Comics has traditionally been a boy dominated hobby, a boy dominated medium. That's no surprise to anybody. That's obvious. Now, if you were to look at young adult fiction, things like that, there's a totally different story. There are many, many women that write in those genres. Whatever, it is what it is. So Jamal Igle responded. Okay, well, here's the person first was upset about this. They said, looks like a bunch of people who couldn't tell you who Jack Kirby, Alan Moore, or Jeff Johns are. A bunch of people who likely hate the history of the characters they will be writing for. Where are all the boys? Now, to be clear, I don't really have a problem with teaching girls how to write for comics. I don't see an issue there. What I do see an issue with it, though, is right, like, where are the boys? They're not necessarily in this group, but are they also teaching young boys who are into comics on how to write comics? I would be interested to see if that was the case. So Jamal Igle counters with this statement.
This post was probably written by a guy who doesn't know who Ramona Frodon, Jackie Orms, Joe Duffy, Annie Nassetti, Aletha Martinez are either. Boys don't need support getting into mainstream comics.
Now, I always have a problem with this line of argument that because there are other people with the same superficial characteristics of you that are successful, that means that you don't need any help because your kind has already had help. You see how gross that is when you think about it. The success of Bill Gates has nothing to do with me, and my current income has nothing to do with the success of Bill Gates. Honestly, they don't. And this whole argument that you're all lumped together and you somehow have meetings together and you help each other out, it really is nonsense and kind of surprising. And so Tim Seeley of, Hack and Slash, he's done a lot of things. That's, I think, what he's more well known for. He actually responded and he disagreed. Now, you'll notice anytime somebody in comics disagrees with the narrative, there's a lot of pushback against those people. And behind the scenes, I'll tell you what I really believe happens is that somebody comes behind and puts their arm around them and basically says, hey man, you're kind of making us look bad when you say stuff like that. It might be a good idea if you stopped saying it. And shortly after, they'll either change their mind, disavow, ignore it, whatever, you get the idea. But this happens a lot in comics. It's kind of shocking how much you need to have the same opinion, and people will absolutely enforce that in comics. So Tim Seeley says, well, I'll disagree only in that boys ages 10 to 17 kind of do need help getting into mainstream comics because they don't read them. We've essentially given up on them. This statement is extremely revealing. Coming from somebody that is in the comic industry, to say that they've given up on boys ages 10 to 17. Now, normally those would be the ripe age of boys getting into comics. That's traditionally what would be the ages. But now those boys are playing video games. Why? Because video games are providing them with entertainment, and they are actually targeting entertainment directly to them. Whereas comic books, there are a lot of issues here. One, and first and foremost, is the political agenda that's there. But it's also a political agenda that's aimed for older readers. I get it. Older readers have money and they're into comics. They like comics and all that kind of good stuff. But if you're not continuing to grow your readership, there's a problem. So Tim Seeley is going to get a little bit of backlash here and also a little bit of support from, maybe some familiar faces that you've seen on Twitter. This is troublesome because there are so many people that will push back in public or private and basically say this is an opinion you should not have. Here's one response saying of that demographic, they read manga. Ooh, burn, that's tough. And then Tim Seeley responds, and it's sad that we don't make them comics in this country. Now, this really does go full circle if you think about it. Comics, the reason why they were so boy-centric, a lot of it appealed to boys and things like that, but there's also some reasons, and I've made videos about this in the past, but boys generally don't read as much or as well as young girls. It's not I know somebody's going to comment and say, I read great. I'm sure you did. In general, girls read a lot more than boys do in general. Also, in general, boys are more likely to read comics than girls, or that at least traditionally has been the case. Comics were sort of filling this role for boys that would get them into reading when they otherwise would not choose to read. So the fact that this is a male-dominated hobby shouldn't really surprise anybody. Just like, novels and, short fiction and things like that, women are reading a lot more of that than men. Girls are reading a lot more of that than boys. That's statistically true. Obviously, it's not that boys don't read. I know, I can see it in the comments coming already. This is a generalization, and it's statistically true. The problem is when you fill that area with, you're basically driving out the young boys. It's not like they just disappear, or it's not like Jamal Igle would have you believe that they're just getting into comics independently and they don't need any help. That's absolutely not true. I have an 8-year-old son, and I've been, trying to get him into comics. He's got some that he likes. He is still a little young. But it's because of efforts for me to bring comics to him that I'm hoping he'll read comics and want more comics and things like that. But outside of that kind of a relationship, boys are not just finding comics themselves and reading them. And that's because they're really hard to find. And it's also really hard to find comics that are actually targeted to boys in that age. And if we're just talking about writing comics, how easy is it for boys to get into writing comics? I'll tell you, and everybody will tell you, it's extremely difficult. I don't think it matters at all. It's difficult all around. Yeah, this is kind of a moot point. I had a few other points I want to make, but I want to point this out real quick. I forgot to make a video about this. This is Cover Crafters trading cards. It kind of reminds me of the Garbage Pail Kids. They were trading cards, and it's all satire. And so if you're interested, I'm going to put the link in this video. Check it out. Pixel Trader is the one that put this together. He's a good guy, and yeah, he could use your support. So please do check it out. So on the same day that this is happening on Twitter, Bleeding Cool is actually came out with this article on Dan DiDio and how he's calling out the speculator market, and it basically is giving the wrong perception that the market is healthy. So why don't they see this coincidence? I believe that many others do, but they're afraid to say anything because they're opinions that you're not supposed to have. Boys are not getting into comics. This is the truth. And we have people in comics saying that they have been abandoned. Young boys have been abandoned from comics. And at the same time, not only have they been abandoned from readership, but they're being priced out of the market because everything is going for this speculator collector's market. Now, I firmly believe that there are probably 3 different types of comic book buyers, customers, and I think it's okay to serve all 3 of them. The problem is that they've been focusing too much on the one. So first, we'll say you have speculators who are interested in buying comics because they might go up in value and they could make some money. I personally don't have a problem with this group of people, and generally speaking, I don't know anybody that's 100% just about trying to turn a profit in comics. It seems like most people will dabble a little bit in all 3, but you should provide things for these people and understand that prices can go up and there's a secondary market, and that's okay, but it shouldn't solely be aimed at this kind of customer. Number 2 is the reader, somebody that is interested in reading comics for the sake of reading comics. Maybe they don't care as much about the other aspects, but primarily, or maybe they do, they're just secondary. Primarily, they're interested in reading it for the content. This is the type of reader that I believe has really been left out because they don't spend as much money. They're not willing to. I don't know. I don't really understand. It just really, honestly, it's easy money versus hard money. This group of people, it's going to take a little bit more effort to make sure that you're making good comics that they're going to want to read and cherish forever. And I believe that this group of readers is going to actually be going into back issues or buying reprints or things like that of books that they trust are going to be well written and entertaining. Group number 3, I'm just going to call the collectors, the diehards, the diehard fans, perhaps. And this is a group of people that maybe they are spending a little bit more money for special editions of books, but they're not doing it for the resale value. They're doing it because they love it. You see so many people buying all sorts of different stuff. I'm kind of this way when it comes to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I have all the trade paperbacks, or almost all the trade paperbacks, and then I see that they're reprinting things in larger hardcover, and I want them so bad because the covers look really cool. And even though it's the same content, it's like, I just want it. And so this, again, is another group of customer that it is okay to serve. You shouldn't neglect them. But ideally, what I think a comic book industry should be doing is every time they make a product or every given month, they should say, what products are we making for customer A? What products are we making for customer B and C and so forth? You get the idea. You need all 3 of these kinds of customers in order to have a truly healthy market. You should not just be catering to the easiest one to turn a profit on. So Dan DiDio has actually been saying that this is a problem. I think this is good. This really is good that he's actually addressing this. I'm afraid it's a little too little too late. He says, where my concerns come from is about the over-relevance of nostalgia. Speculator market, variant covers, and a lot of things that seem to be driving numbers and sales to give the appearance of a healthy industry, but it's not built on the ongoing success of an individual title in order to keep those numbers successful and maintained. Exactly. You got to keep it healthy. So I would not be surprised at all if he receives a little bit of backlash, or he has a little bit of talking to behind the scenes, or maybe, hopefully, this is actually the signaling of a shift in comics. Maybe he's enough of a leader that people will start listening to him and be willing to voice their concerns with this market. And I'll be frank, Marvel, this is your fault. You need to fix things. DC has at least been pulling back. You have been doubling down on the same terrible practices that have caused this in the first place, and the entire industry is suffering from it. On the other hand, indie comics are doing quite well without you. The funny thing is that every time I hear somebody in comics that starts to speak up and have these unwarranted, ungranted opinions, they end up shutting up after maybe a few months later. I thought of the same thing with Eric Stevenson of Image Comics, the publisher there. He used to be very critical of Marvel and DC. A few years ago, I've mentioned this before, he really was, and he would complain about their business strategies. He already saw all of this coming, just like many of us did. But the problem is, then at some point in time, he started being quiet, and you didn't hear any of this criticism anymore. Does that mean that the market got better? No, I don't think so. Does it mean that really anything changed for the better? No, it's only gotten worse. And yet he's very, very silent on it now. So times are changing. I am really curious to see what happens. At the same time, this is also an amazing time for comics. It really is. Indiegogo and Kickstarter, to a smaller degree, have become a new place for comics. And a lot of people are really enjoying and having a lot of fun backing these projects. So my project Downcast is more than halfway finished. You can actually back it right now. It's in the in-demand phase and be part of the over 100 backers who have backed it right now. Links in the description below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, ring the bell, all that kind of stuff if you like this content, and leave me a comment. All that kind of interaction that you can give me is really, really helpful. So thank you very much, and I will see you next time.